Well, it finally happened. The thing we've been begging Roland to do for years. The SP-404 finally got the huge update it long deserved in its new Mark II version, and I, for one, could not be any happier that it's here. You might be wondering, where is my SP-404 MK2 video? Well, though it would have been amazing if Roland would have picked me among the lucky people to try out their awesome new machine before the release, I didn't make the cut. But I think that just means that I have to work a bit harder so that someday I can also count myself among the early bird reviewers. With your help and support, I'm sure I'll get there someday. Speaking of which, just how awesome is the YouTube music gear community? I mean, these creators covered the Mark II so well and with so many different perspectives, giving us a great sense of what this thing can do, while also letting us share in with the excitement. I just want to give a huge shout out to all of these YouTube creators. You guys are an inspiration, and I'm truly thankful for all your hard work. So, back to this video. What about those of us who own an OG SP-404 or an SX or the A? Should we hold on to it or run out and sell it to buy a shiny new Mk2, since it has potentially made the old version outdated and possibly even obsolete? If you'd like to know why I think the SP-404 SX is still an awesome machine, I have a whole video on that, which I'll link down below. But in this video, we're going to look at some reasons you should consider selling your SP-404, as well as some reasons you might want to hold on to it still. As always, I want to try to go beyond the spec sheet and look at this from an everyday music creator's perspective, just so it makes more sense than just comparing features side by side. If you're already a subscriber, I'm really happy to see you again. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome to the midlifesynthesist. Let's get started. So first, let's ask ourselves a very important question. Does the launch of a Mark II instrument automatically make the Mark I any less desirable? Kind of like how each new iPhone makes the old one seem just a bit less shiny when it comes out? Well, not necessarily. Take the Electron boxes for example. In the case of the Octatrack, the Mk2 version gave it a nice aesthetic and user interface update, along with a few minor upgrades, without changing much of the core functionality. So many people actually opted for buying a used Mk1 and save some cash. In the case of the Analog 4, for example, it's not uncommon to see people in forums saying that they prefer the raw sound of the version 1 over the version 2. Of course, there's always the question of whether or not a musical instrument can really become obsolete. I mean, just because they invented electric guitars, that doesn't make acoustic guitars any less amazing. In many other cases, it's actually the other way around. Vintage instruments like the old analog Roland synths and classic MPCs go for absolutely insane prices on the secondhand market. So with that in mind, let's first take a look at some reasons you should trade in your SP-404 for the new one, and then some reasons why you might want to hold on to it regardless of whether or not you're getting an Mk2. Reasons to sell. Resale prices for the OG SP-404 might plummet if you wait too long before you sell it. With the release of a bigger, better, and badder SP-404, used Mark Is will probably show up for much cheaper on the used market. As time goes on, this is likely to only get worse, since this is not a rare piece of gear. It's actually pretty common because it's insanely successful and very popular. Also, when Mark II SP-404s start reaching the secondhand market, the Mark I will most likely end up being sold for peanuts. Second, at least in my opinion, there's no inherent benefit of the sound in either quality or flavor of the SP-404 Mark I over the Mark II, since there isn't any analog wizardry going on in any of the SPs. There shouldn't be any loss of that magic quality that makes the SP-404 so enjoyable. Instead, I expect the Mark II to give us that same sound with many more options and effects, so holding on to the Mark I only for the sound is probably not such a good idea. Third reason you might want to sell your SP-404 is that the new workflow might make the old one just unbearable. Even those of us who absolutely adore the SP-404 always had to end up admitting that chopping up samples and actually making music on it could become a pretty tedious affair. Some people actually opted for chopping their samples in other machines or DAWs and just use the SP-404 as a live performance effects machine. The inclusion of a new screen, as well as all of the other features, open up the SP-404 to an entirely new and much more streamlined workflow, which in turn will probably make the old SP-404 be like trying to use MS-DOS after having experienced using Windows XP. Finally, the fourth reason, at least for me, is the connectivity on the old SP-404. To me, one of the more annoying things of the SP-404 was always its phono audio ins and outs, as well as the lack of a MIDI out. Those were quirks that I would bear just because the machine was extremely cool and so much fun. But now, with a much better alternative, I won't be missing those features. Of course, here I'm speaking from the position of someone with a fixed gear budget, someone who can't afford or isn't willing to spend as much to have both the Mk1 and the Mk2 in their arsenal. Up until now, both my gear addiction as well as this YouTube channel have been sponsored by MasterCard. Not the company, mind you, just my own sad, severely abused MasterCard. So for the moment, when I want to get a new piece of gear to review or to own, that often means I have to sell something else. That's why you don't see my sub 25 or my grandmother anymore. Oh, granny. That being said, if you are in the financial position to buy the Mark II without having to sell your Mark I, or if you have the Mark I and you're kind of on the fence as to whether or not you should grab the Mark II, here are some reasons why maybe you shouldn't take your old SP-404 out to the back of the barn and put its lights out just yet. As I said before, the resale value on the secondhand market of an SP-404 Mark II will probably drop down substantially, so much so that it might not even be worth selling at all. The Mark II is priced at an extremely competitive $499. That's $50 less than a new SP-404A, forcing any potential seller of the Mark I to make a huge cut on the price in order to make the offer attractive to any prospective buyer. In that sense, if you're not going to profit much out of selling your Mark I, it might be better to just keep it safe and cozy, and maybe many years in the future, it might be worth much more if it's kept in great conditions and with its original box and cables. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a second, click that like button, and maybe drop me a line, even if it's just to say hi, because it helps the channel grow and I really like being here talking gear and music with you. Thanks. Another reason you might want to hold on to your SP-404 just for a little longer is because your experience on the Mark I might not directly translate into the Mark II. If you're one of those amazing artists who have spent countless hours throughout the years honing your skills on the SP, one of those earnest people who can use the SP-404 with their eyes closed, I wouldn't be so quick to chuck it out the window, since there's no guarantee that the actual feel of the Mk2 will be exactly the same as the Mk1. I'm thinking kind of like how playing acoustic guitar does translate superficially into playing electric guitar, but deep down the style and feel of each instrument are very different at the end of the day. The SP-404 is an instrument in the purest sense of the word. If you know it extremely well and have become accustomed to all its quirks and limitations, then those same limitations are probably a big reason why you love it so much. So be careful there. Just because the Mark II is better doesn't mean you will necessarily find it more enjoyable, nor that you will click with it the same way that you click with the Mark I. Finally, I think that a huge reason why you might want to keep it a little while longer is sentimental value. I don't consider myself a hoarder, nor do I tend to attach sentimental value to the material things I own. However, musical instruments are quite different. You don't just use an instrument, you have a relationship with it. You talk to it, you share your deepest emotions with it. The time you spend with an instrument is sacred, and the longer and more you use it, the deeper that bond is. So even though it might be a bit cheesy for some, I at least think it's an absolutely good reason, even if it's your only one, to keep it around a bit longer. In my case, I couldn't be more excited for the Mark II, and I've already put my pre-order in perfect circuit. If you're also thinking about jumping on the Mark II bandwagon and you'd like to support this channel, please use the affiliate link down below to get your spanking new SP-404. So tell me about it. Are you selling your old SP-404, or are you going to hang on to it for just a little longer? Tell me in the comments why you're considering either option. I'd really love to know what you think about it. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week. I'll see you in the next one.